The Boeing 787 Dreamliner cruised at 37,000 feet over the Pacific. Its passengers settled into the rhythm of a 14-hour flight from Seoul to Los Angeles. In Seat 2A, a woman with prematurely silver-streaked auburn hair slept soundly, her face turned toward the window where moonlight painted clouds silver below. Her hands, calloused from years of gripping flight sticks, rested peacefully on a dog-eared copy of The Art of War. A small tattoo on her wrist, wings wrapped around a lightning bolt, remained hidden beneath the cuff of her civilian blazer. Captain James Rodriguez had been flying commercial for 23 years, but nothing had prepared him for the radio transmission crackling through his headset at 3:47 hours. United 847, this is PACCOM. We have a developing situation. Request immediate course change to heading 270 and climb to flight level 400. PACCOM, United 847. Negative on the climb, we're at max altitude for passenger comfort. Can you clarify the nature of the situation? Rodriguez exchanged glances with his co-pilot, whose hands had instinctively moved toward the controls. United 847, we have multiple unknown aircraft approaching your position from the northwest. They're not responding to radio calls and have no transponder signals. ETA to intercept, 12 minutes. The blood drained from Rodriguez's face. In all his years of commercial aviation, the phrase unknown aircraft had never been directed at his flight. His mind raced through protocols he'd hoped never to use. PACCOM, requesting military escort. Negative, United 847. Nearest fighters are 18 minutes out. You're on your own until then. Rodriguez's hands trembled as he reached for the cabin intercom. This wasn't a mechanical failure or weather emergency. This was something else entirely. Something that made veteran air traffic controllers use words like unknown aircraft in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where nothing should exist except water and wind. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. His voice remained professionally calm, though his knuckles had gone white against the microphone. We're experiencing a minor navigation adjustment. As a precautionary measure, I need to ask if there are any military pilots, active duty or veteran, currently on board. If so, please identify yourselves to the flight crew immediately. The cabin remained quiet except for the steady hum of engines. Most passengers continued sleeping, oblivious to the drama unfolding 37,000 feet above the ocean. But in Seat 2A, amber eyes opened slowly, their depth suggesting someone who had awakened not from sleep, but from vigilance. The woman's gaze moved to the nearest flight attendant, then toward the cockpit, her expression shifting from passenger to something altogether more dangerous. She knew that tone. She had used it herself, years ago, in skis far more hostile than these peaceful clouds suggested. Her fingers unconsciously traced the hidden tattoo on her wrist, wings and lightning, the mark of the 77th Fighter Squadron. Call sign, Tempest. The announcement had found exactly who it was looking for. Lieutenant Colonel Kai, Tempest. Nakamura had been sleeping in first class when her war came looking for her one more time. She unbuckled her seatbelt with movements precise as clockwork, 38 years of life, condensed into the controlled grace of someone who had learned to move deliberately in crisis. The blazer came off, revealing the lean muscle definition of arms that had once wrestled F-35 Lightning fighters through 9G turns above the South China Sea. "Excuse me," she said quietly to the flight attendant, her voice carrying an authority that made the younger woman step back instinctively. "Tell Captain Rodriguez that Lieutenant Colonel Nakamura is on board. Fighter pilot, retired 6 months ago. 4,200 combat hours, including 180 combat sorties." The flight attendant's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I'll tell him my call sign is Tempest, and I need to speak with him immediately." 3 minutes later, Kai stood in the cockpit doorway, her civilian clothes somehow unable to disguise the military bearing that had been carved into her bones by 2 decades of service. Captain Rodriguez turned from his instruments, and she saw her own recognition reflected in his eyes, the look of someone staring at a weapon that had been temporarily sheathed. Colonel, thank God. We have bogies inbound 12 minutes out. PACCOM says fighters are en route, but 18 minutes, Kai finished. I heard, what's your defensive capability? Rodriguez's laugh held no humor. We're a passenger aircraft, Colonel. We don't have defensive capability. Kai's amber eyes swept across the instrument panel, cataloging information with the systematic efficiency of someone trained to read chaos and find patterns. PACCOM give you any details on the unknowns. Number, type, behavior. 4 aircraft, no transponder, maintaining radio silence. Flying in formation at 35,000 feet, closing fast. She processed this in seconds. Formation flying meant coordination. No transponder meant intent to avoid identification. Radio silence meant they didn't want to talk. In her experience, aircraft that approached civilian airliners with those characteristics had only one purpose. Captain, I need you to patch me through to PACCOM directly. Rodriguez hesitated. Colonel, with respect, you're a civilian passenger now. Captain, her voice dropped to a register that had once commanded squadrons. Patch me through to PACCOM, now. The radio crackled to life. PACCOM, this is United 847. We have a military advisor on board. United 847, PACCOM, put them on. Kai took the headset with hands that had guided million-dollar aircraft through combat zones where split-second decisions meant the difference between mission success and body bags. PACCOM, this is Lieutenant Colonel Kai Nakamura, call sign Tempest, serial number 4477921. I'm onboard United 847 as a passenger, but I'm offering tactical consultation. A pause, then, Tempest, PACCOM actual. We copy your serial number. Be advised we show 4 unknown aircraft, possibly military variants, Vector 300 at Angels 35, rate of closure indicating intercept in 8 minutes. Profile suggests hostile intent. Kai closed her eyes, her mind shifting into the tactical processing mode that had kept her alive through 180 combat missions. PACCOM, what's the nearest military installation? Hickam Air Force Base, Pearl Harbor, 170 miles southeast. Weather: clear skies, visibility unlimited, winds light and variable. She opened her eyes, and Captain Rodriguez saw something that made him unconsciously straighten. The woman standing in his cockpit was no longer a passenger who happened to have military experience. She was a weapons system calculating variables. Captain, how quickly can you get us to Hickam? At current speed and heading, 22 minutes. The unknowns will be on us in 6. PACCOM, I need you to vector those fighters to our position, not to Hickam. We're going to have company long before we reach friendly airspace. Through the cockpit windows, the Pacific stretched endlessly black beneath a canopy of stars that had witnessed countless battles in these same waters. Somewhere in that darkness, 4 aircraft were closing distance with mathematical precision, their intentions as opaque as the night itself. Kai Tempest, Nakamura had thought her fighting days were over. 6 months ago, she had walked away from the cockpit for the final time, trading the lightning bolt wings of an F-35 pilot for civilian clothes and commercial flights. But warfare, she was learning, had a way of following certain people wherever they went. PACCOM Tempest, I need to know everything you have on those incoming aircraft. Configuration, estimated capabilities, point of origin if possible. Tempest, PACCOM. Radar signature suggests fighter-class aircraft, possibly modified for extended range. They appeared on scope 47 minutes ago, bearing northwest of your position. No flight plan filed, no response to communication attempts. Behavior is consistent with intercept protocol. The words hit Kai like ice water. Intercept protocol. Someone was hunting United 847 specifically, not just any commercial aircraft that happened to be in the wrong place. This wasn't random, this was targeted. "Captain," she said quietly, "I need to know your passenger manifest. Specifically, anyone on board who might be of strategic interest to a foreign government." Rodriguez paled. "Colonel, I don't have access to detailed passenger information, but—" He paused, consulting his flight notes. "We have 3 passengers traveling on diplomatic immunity. Japanese trade delegation returning from Seoul." Kai felt pieces clicking into place with the terrible clarity of a puzzle she'd hoped never to solve. Japanese trade delegation. What kind of trade? Defense contracts, I think. Something about advanced radar systems. The cockpit fell silent except for the steady thrum of engines and the increasingly urgent chatter from air traffic control. Kai stared out at the star-filled darkness, her tactical mind processing implications that made her blood run cold. Someone had waited until a Japanese defense delegation was over the middle of the Pacific, far from help, to make their move. PACCOM, Tempest. I assess this as a planned intercept operation targeting specific passengers. Request immediate support and advise if you have any intelligence on who might want to prevent Japanese defense technology from reaching the United States. Tempest, that's above my clearance level. I can tell you our fighters are now 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. The unknown aircraft would reach them in 4. Captain Rodriguez leaned closer to Kai, his voice barely above a whisper. "Colonel, what are our options?" She studied his instruments again, her fingers unconsciously curling as if around a fighter's control stick. "Honestly, we run, and we pray those fighters get here before someone decides to turn us into debris scattered across the Pacific." But even as she said it, Kai knew prayers weren't going to be enough. Not tonight. The first sign of trouble came not from radar but from the cabin. A flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we have passengers at the windows reporting lights in the distance. Multiple aircraft, flying in formation." Kai moved to the cockpit window and pressed her face against the glass. There, 4 points of light arranged in diamond formation, growing larger by the second. Even in the darkness, she could make out the angular profiles of military aircraft, their navigation lights the only concession to international aviation law. "Contact," she announced. 4 aircraft, diamond formation, bearing 320. Rate of closure suggests they'll be alongside us in 90 seconds. Rodriguez's hands shook as he reached for the radio. "PACCOM, United 847. We have visual contact with unknown aircraft. They're closing fast." United 847, maintain current heading and altitude. Do not deviate from flight plan. Fighters are 8 minutes out. 8 minutes might as well have been 8 hours. Kai watched the formation close the distance with the precision of a military unit that had rehearsed this exact scenario. These weren't opportunistic pirates or rogue pilots. This was a planned operation executed by professionals. "They're going to try to force us down," she said quietly. "Standard intercept protocol. They'll position themselves around us, probably try radio contact first, then escalate to more persuasive measures if we don't comply." More persuasive measures. Kai's expression remained carefully neutral. Warning shots, targeting our engines, things that make civilian pilots very eager to follow instructions. As if summoned by her words, the radio erupted with an unfamiliar voice speaking heavily accented English. "United 847, you are ordered to descend to flight level 250 and follow our lead aircraft to designated coordinates. Comply immediately." Rodriguez looked at Kai with desperate eyes. "What do I do?" She stared out at the 4 aircraft now clearly visible in formation around them, sleek, predatory shapes that belonged to no civilian fleet. Her mind raced through options, all of them bad. If they complied, the passengers would disappear into international waters. If they refused, those aircraft carried enough firepower to turn the 787 into falling debris. Tell them we're experiencing mechanical difficulties and need to maintain current altitude, she said finally. Colonel, that's not going to. It's going to buy us time. PACCOM said 8 minutes. We need 8 minutes. Rodriguez keyed the radio with trembling fingers. Unknown aircraft, United 847. We are experiencing pressurization issues and cannot descend at this time. Request clearance to continue to nearest suitable airport. The response came immediately, colder than the air outside their windows. United 847, you have 30 seconds to begin descent, or we will assist with your mechanical difficulties. Kai closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of command settling over her shoulders like an old flight suit. 6 months of retirement vanished in an instant, replaced by the crystalline focus that had carried her through 180 combat sorties. When she opened her eyes, Captain Rodriguez was looking at a fighter pilot again. Captain, when I give you the word, I need you to push this aircraft to its limits. Emergency descent, maximum rate. We're going to drop like a stone and pray those fighters overhead can reach us before these bastards decide to stop playing games. The radio crackled again, but this time it was PACCOM. United 847, be advised, fighters are 6 minutes out. Can you maintain position? Kai keyed the microphone herself. PACCOM Tempest. Negative on maintaining position. We have hostile aircraft demanding we deviate from course. I assess imminent threat to aircraft and passengers, requesting emergency support. Tempest, fighters are vectoring to your position at maximum speed. Hang tight. Through the cockpit window, she could see the lead aircraft adjusting position, moving directly ahead of the 787. The pilot was clearly visible in the other cockpit, and even across the distance between them, she could sense his impatience. This was a professional who had expected immediate compliance and was now improvising. That improvisation might be their salvation or their death sentence. 30 seconds, Rodriguez whispered. Kai nodded, her hand moving unconsciously to her wrist where the tattoo lay hidden beneath fabric. Wings and lightning bolt, the symbol of pilots who flew into storms instead of away from them. She had walked away from that life, but apparently that life hadn't walked away from her. PACCOM Tempest. Unknown aircraft are taking aggressive posture. I'm going to attempt evasive maneuvers. Tempest, you're in a civilian airliner, not a fighter. Recommend compliance until support arrives. PACCOM, respectfully, I didn't survive 180 combat missions by complying with hostile aircraft. Rodriguez, on my mark, emergency descent. Maximum rate. The lead aircraft was now close enough that she could see individual details. The non-standard markings, the external fuel tanks that explained how they'd managed to reach this position so far from any known airfield. The weapon pods slung beneath wings that definitely didn't belong to any civilian aviation authority. Her radio crackled one final time. United 847, begin descent now or face consequences. Kai looked at Captain Rodriguez, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. Mark, now. Rodriguez pushed the yoke forward, and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, designed for passenger comfort and fuel efficiency, suddenly became an instrument of survival. The aircraft pitched nose down into an emergency descent that pressed every passenger into their seats and triggered a symphony of warning alarms. But as they dropped toward the dark Pacific below, Kai caught sight of new lights in the distance. 4 more aircraft approaching fast from the southeast, their navigation lights arranged in the familiar pattern of U.S. military formation flying. The cavalry was coming. The question was whether they'd arrive in time to prevent this from becoming an international incident involving debris scattered across 3 square miles of ocean. At 28,000 feet and descending rapidly, Lieutenant Colonel Kai Tempest Nakamura gripped the back of the pilot's seat and prepared to find out if 6 months of retirement had dulled the tactical instincts that had once made her one of the most feared fighter pilots in the Pacific theater. The emergency descent created chaos in the passenger cabin, but Kai's attention remained focused on the 4 aircraft that had followed them down, maintaining formation with the precision of pilots who had trained for exactly this scenario. Through the intercom, she could hear flight attendants attempting to calm passengers, while the 787 continued its controlled plunge toward the ocean below. "They're staying with us," she reported to Rodriguez, whose knuckles had gone white against the controls. "Professional pilots, this isn't their first intercept operation." The radio erupted with multiple voices. PACCOM coordinating the inbound fighters, the hostile aircraft demanding compliance, and now air traffic control from HICAM trying to understand why a commercial flight had suddenly deviated from its approved flight plan. United 847 HICAM Tower. You are cleared for emergency approach, runway 08 left. Vector 140, maintain current descent rate. Negative HICAM, Kai responded, taking control of communications. United 847 is under escort by unknown military aircraft. We need fighter support before we can approach any airfield. Through the cockpit window, she watched one of the hostile aircraft move closer, close enough that she could see the pilot gesturing, universal aviation signals that needed no translation. Follow or die. PACCOM, Tempest. Hostile aircraft are attempting to force us toward coordinates that are definitely not HICAM Air Force Base. I assess they intend to force land us somewhere isolated for passenger extraction. Tempest fighters are now 3 minutes out. Call sign Razor Flight, F-22 Raptors out of HICAM. Can you maintain evasive action until they arrive? Kai looked at Rodriguez, who was fighting to maintain control as the 787 descended through 22,000 feet. Civilian airliners weren't designed for the kind of maneuvering that might be necessary to stay alive for 3 more minutes. PACCOM, we're a passenger aircraft with 347 souls on board. Our evasive options are limited. That's when the first warning shot streaked past their starboard wing, a tracer round that lit up the darkness like a deadly shooting star. The message was unmistakable: stop playing games. Rodriguez jerked on the controls, his commercial pilot training warring with pure survival instinct. "Colonel, they're shooting at us." "Warning shot," Kai said grimly. "Next one won't miss unless we give them what they want." She keyed the microphone again. "PACCOM, we are taking fire. Repeat, United 847 is under hostile fire from unknown military aircraft." The response came immediately. United 847, Razor Flight is 2 minutes out. Recommend evasive action. Evasive action. In an F-35 Lightning, Kai could have rolled inverted and dropped like a stone, pulled 11 GS in a climbing turn, used the aircraft's stealth capabilities to disappear from enemy radar. In a Boeing 787 Dreamliner with 347 passengers, her options were considerably more limited. "Rodriguez, how much stress can this aircraft take?" "Colonel, we're already exceeding normal operational parameters. If I push it any harder..." Another tracer round, this one closer. Close enough that the thermal signature registered on the 787's collision avoidance system, triggering a new series of alarms. PACCOM Tempest, hostile aircraft are escalating, they're not bluffing. Tempest Razor 11, we have you on scope. 4 hostiles in diamond formation around your position. We are 30 seconds out. 30 seconds. Kai watched the lead hostile aircraft adjust position again, moving to a firing angle that would allow a clean shot at the 787's engines. These pilots weren't amateurs. They knew exactly how to disable a civilian aircraft without destroying it outright. She made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed if she were still active duty. Rodriguez, when I give you the word, I want you to kill all exterior lights, navigation, strobes, everything. Then turn 15 degrees starboard and push the throttles to maximum. We're going to try to break their target lock. Colonel, that's insane. Yes, but it's better than letting them shoot out our engines and force us down in the middle of the Pacific. The radio crackled. Razor 11 visual contact with hostiles, moving to intercept. And suddenly, the night sky erupted with the thunder of jet engines as 4 F-22 Raptors materialized out of the darkness like avenging angels. The hostile aircraft broke formation immediately, peeling away from the 787 as air-to-air radar locked onto their positions. Unknown aircraft, this is Razor 11, United States Air Force. You are in violation of international airspace. Withdraw immediately or you will be engaged. Kai felt tension drain from her shoulders as she watched the 4 hostile aircraft accelerate away toward the northwest, their mission aborted by the arrival of American fighters. The 787 continued its descent toward Hickam, its passengers unaware of how close they had come to becoming headlines on tomorrow's news. PACCOM, United 847. Hostile aircraft are withdrawing, requesting clearance to continue to Hickam for emergency landing. United 847, cleared direct Hickam. Razor flight will escort you in. As the lights of Oahu appeared in the distance, Captain Rodriguez turned to Kai with something approaching awe. Colonel, how did you know they would break off when the fighters arrived? Kai smiled grimly. Because whoever sent them isn't ready for a shooting war with the United States Air Force. This was a snatch-and-grab operation, not a declaration of war. When it became clear they couldn't complete the mission quietly, they withdrew. But even as she said it, Kai knew this was far from over. Someone had just demonstrated the capability and willingness to intercept civilian aircraft in international waters. The Japanese defense delegation in the cabin below had been targeted for a reason, and that reason wasn't going away simply because 4 F-22s had shown up at the right moment. As the 787 lined up for its approach to Hickam Air Force Base, Kai stared out at the Pacific and wondered what other threats were lurking in the darkness beyond the reach of radar and radio. Her retirement, she realized, was officially over. The wheels of United 847 touched down on Hickam's runway with the gentlest kiss of rubber on concrete that Captain Rodriguez had ever managed, despite his hands still shaking from adrenaline. As the 787 rolled toward the terminal, Kai could see military vehicles racing alongside, security teams, intelligence officers, and enough firepower to start a small war. Through the cabin intercom, Rodriguez's voice carried the professional calm that had returned now that they were safely on American soil. Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived in Honolulu ahead of schedule due to weather conditions. Please remain seated until we reach the gate. Weather conditions. Kai almost smiled at the euphemism. She supposed hostile military aircraft attempting to intercept our flight might have caused some passenger concern. Colonel, Rodriguez said quietly, what happens now? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message from a number she recognized, her former commanding officer at the Pentagon. The message was brief and typically military. Tempest, Hawaii, now General Morrison. Within minutes of reaching the gate, the aircraft was surrounded by Air Force security personnel. Passengers disembarked normally, most unaware that their flight had been anything other than routine. But Kai noticed the subtle details. The way certain passengers from the Japanese delegation were quietly escorted to separate vehicles, the intelligence officers conducting discreet interviews with flight crew members, the electronic warfare equipment being positioned around the terminal. She was gathering her belongings when a young Air Force captain approached her seat. Lieutenant Colonel Nakamura, General Morrison requests your immediate presence at PACCOM headquarters. Kai nodded, unsurprised. She had known this moment would come from the instant she'd identified herself to the cockpit crew. Once you used your military credentials during an international incident, retirement became a temporary condition rather than a permanent one. Captain, I assume the Japanese delegation is being provided appropriate security. Yes, ma'am. Full protective detail. They'll be transferred to a secure facility pending threat assessment. Which meant someone at a pay grade well above captain had made the decision that tonight's intercept attempt was part of a larger operation. The kind of operation that required reactivating retired fighter pilots who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. 40 minutes later, Kai sat in a conference room at Pacific Command headquarters, facing a collection of officers whose combined years of service probably exceeded the age of the building itself. General Morrison looked exactly as she remembered, silver-haired, steel-eyed, and radiating the kind of quiet authority that came from making life-and-death decisions for 30 years. "Tempest," he said without preamble, "good work tonight. Your tactical assessment was correct. This was a planned operation targeting the Japanese delegation. Sir, do we know who was behind it?" General Morrison gestured to the intelligence officer seated beside him, a colonel whose name tag read Chen, and whose expression suggested he'd been dealing with unpleasant realities for several hours. "Colonel Chen will brief you on what we know." Chen opened a classified folder and spread several photographs across the table. Kai recognized the aircraft immediately, modified variants of Chinese J-20 fighters, equipped with extended-range fuel tanks and electronic warfare pods. The aircraft that intercepted your flight were operating from a mobile platform approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of your position. We believe it was a converted cargo vessel, equipped with a temporary flight deck. "Improvised aircraft carrier," Kai said. "Clever, allows them to launch operations far from their normal territorial waters." Exactly. The Japanese delegation you helped protect was carrying intelligence on a new radar system that can detect stealth aircraft, specifically, aircraft like the J-20. Someone wanted very badly to prevent that information from reaching American defense contractors. General Morrison leaned forward. "Tempest, I'm going to be direct. We have intelligence suggesting this was a test run. The intercept capability they demonstrated tonight could be used against any civilian aircraft carrying sensitive personnel or information. We need someone with your experience to help develop countermeasures." Kai had seen this coming from the moment the hostile aircraft had peeled away from the 787. "Sir, I'm retired." "Your retirement is hereby suspended, effective immediately. You're being recalled to active duty with a promotion to full colonel and assignment to a classified program dealing with unconventional threats to civilian aviation." She looked around the conference room, noting the maps of Pacific shipping lanes, the satellite photos of suspicious vessel movements, the intelligence assessments that painted a picture of a new kind of warfare, one that blurred the lines between military and civilian targets. "What kind of unconventional threats?" Colonel Chen answered. "The kind that turn passenger airliners into strategic targets. The kind that require fighter pilots who can think like both military officers and civilian aviation experts." He paused, studying her with the calculating gaze of an intelligence professional. "The kind that require someone with your specific experience." General Morrison stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Colonel Nakamura, you have 12 hours to consider your options, but I'll be honest, whether you accept this assignment officially or not, you're already involved. The people who tried to intercept that flight tonight know exactly who you are and what you did. Your face was visible in that cockpit window." As Kai left the conference room, she understood the unspoken implication. She could accept the assignment and work within the system to prevent future incidents, or she could refuse and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering when someone would decide that the pilot who had disrupted their operation needed to be permanently removed from the equation. She stepped outside into the warm Hawaiian night and looked up at the stars that had witnessed her brief return to combat. Somewhere out there, hostile aircraft were returning to their floating base, their pilots analyzing what had gone wrong and planning how to do better next time. Lieutenant Colonel Kai Tempest Nakamura had thought she was finished with war, but as she stood beneath the Pacific sky, she realized that war was far from finished with her. The next morning found Kai in the PACCOM Flight Operations Center, studying tactical displays that showed the breadth of what they were facing. The mobile platform that had launched the previous night's intercept had vanished, disappearing into the vast expanse of the Pacific like a ghost ship from another era. "Stealth vessel," explained Commander Sarah Kim, the naval intelligence officer who had been tracking unusual maritime activity for the past 6 months. Radar-absorbent coating, electronic countermeasures, the works. When it wants to disappear, it becomes effectively invisible to conventional detection methods. Kai studied the satellite imagery showing the platform's last known position. How many aircraft can it carry? Conservative estimate: 8 to 12 fighter-class aircraft, plus support equipment and fuel for extended operations. Which means last night's intercept used only half their available assets, Kai said grimly. They were testing us, seeing how we'd respond. General Morrison joined them at the display table, coffee in hand, and the expression of a man who had been receiving unpleasant intelligence updates all morning. "It gets worse, Colonel. We have reports of similar unusual maritime activity near major shipping lanes in the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic. Someone is positioning mobile aviation platforms in international waters across the globe." The implications hit Kai immediately. They're creating the capability to intercept civilian aircraft anywhere in the world, far from land-based air defense systems. "That's our assessment," Morrison confirmed. "And traditional military responses are limited because these platforms operate in international waters, technically violating no laws until they launch actual attacks." Commander Kim pulled up additional imagery showing commercial aircraft routes overlaid with potential threat zones. The pattern was sobering. Nearly every major international air route passed through areas where mobile platforms could operate undetected. "Sir," Kai said carefully, "what exactly is my mission?" Morrison gestured to a classified folder that had been placed beside her chair. "Read that. Then tell me if you're willing to accept the most dangerous assignment of your career." The folder contained details of Operation Lightning Strike, a joint program between Air Force Special Operations and Navy intelligence designed to identify, track, and neutralize mobile aviation threats in international waters. The mission profile included deep cover operations, civilian aircraft infiltration, and tactics that existed in the gray areas between military and intelligence work. "You want me to pose as a civilian pilot and fly into potential intercept situations," she summarized after reading the classified material. "We want you to be our canary in the coal mine," Morrison said bluntly. "Someone with the tactical expertise to survive contact with hostile aircraft and the civilian credentials to be in the right place when they make their next move." Kai closed the folder and looked around the operations center, noting the urgency in every conversation, the tactical displays showing threat assessments that painted the Pacific as a hunting ground rather than a peaceful ocean. 6 months ago, she had walked away from this world because she thought she had given enough. Now that world was asking for everything she had left. "When do I start?" "You already have. Your cover identity is being prepared, civilian pilot with an impeccable record, available for charter flights and high-priority passenger transport. Your first assignment leaves tomorrow." Destination. Morrison's expression was grim. Singapore. We have intelligence suggesting another intercept operation is planned, this time targeting a Malaysian defense minister traveling with details of new anti-aircraft systems. The flight profile matches last night's pattern exactly. Kai felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling over her shoulders. Somewhere in the vast Pacific, hostile forces were planning their next move, positioning their floating platforms and calculating intercept vectors. Her job was to be there when they struck, to be the difference between successful operations and international incidents. She looked out through the operations center's windows at the peaceful Hawaiian morning, knowing it might be the last quiet moment she would have for a very long time. Operation Lightning Strike was about to begin, and Lieutenant Colonel Kai Tempest Nakamura was going back to war, this time in civilian clothes, flying commercial aircraft instead of military fighters, but carrying the same deadly responsibility she had always carried. The mission was simple: stop hostile forces from turning the world's civilian aviation system into their personal hunting ground. The execution, she suspected, was going to be anything but simple. 2 days later, Kai sat in the co-pilot seat of a Gulfstream G650 approaching Singapore's Changi Airport, her civilian pilot credentials listing her as Catherine Nash, independent contractor with 15 years of corporate aviation experience. The legend was perfect down to the smallest details: previous employers, flight hours, even a fabricated personal history that would withstand casual inspection. Her passenger was Dr. Ahmed Hassan, Malaysia's deputy defense minister, traveling with a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist and a security detail that had been briefed on potential threats to their flight. What they didn't know was that their pilot was a recently reactivated Air Force colonel, whose real mission had nothing to do with safely delivering passengers to their destination. "Ms. Nash," Dr. Hassan said during the flight, "I understand you've flown in challenging conditions before." "Some," Kai replied, maintaining her cover identity while monitoring radar displays that showed normal commercial traffic patterns. Corporate aviation can be unpredictable. What she didn't mention was the secure communications equipment hidden in the Gulfstream's electronics bay, or the fact that 3 different intelligence agencies were tracking their progress across the South China Sea. Operation Lightning Strike had positioned assets throughout the region, waiting to respond if another intercept operation materialized. It materialized exactly as intelligence had predicted. Corporate 779, Singapore Control. Be advised, we have unknown aircraft approaching your position from the northeast. They are not responding to radio calls. Kai's hands moved to the controls with practiced precision, her cover identity temporarily forgotten as tactical instincts took over. Singapore Control, Corporate 779. Request vector to nearest military airfield. Corporate 779 cleared direct Paya Lebar Air Base. Descend to flight level 250, heading 180. Through the cockpit window, she could see them. 4 aircraft in formation, their profiles unmistakably military despite the absence of national markings. The same diamond formation, the same professional precision as the previous week's intercept attempt. "Dr. Hassan," she said calmly, "please ensure your seatbelt is securely fastened. We may experience some turbulence." Her passenger looked out the window and paled. "Those are fighter aircraft." "Yes, sir, they are." The radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice. "Corporate 779.